Hi, I'm Andy. Welcome back to Python Puzzles. So let's do some puzzles based on the while loop. So what's a while loop? It's essentially a block of code that will repeat until a certain condition is met. So you have while and then a condition and then a block of code, and that block of code will just continually repeat until your condition's met. You can have if statements and all sorts of things inside that, but it's just going to continually run. So you want to have maybe a condition for user input. So we ask the user a question. If they don't meet the right criteria, maybe we don't want them to enter numbers or something, we just want them to enter letters, then it continually prompts them, runs that input statement until they enter what we want, and then it exits once the condition's met. So we could accidentally set this to run forever. If the condition's never met, it will just run forever. So this is very common. Let's take a look at it, okay? Let's head on over to GitHub. The URL's in the description. Let's clone the code, hit the code drop-down menu, copy the URL, and using GitHub Desktop, File, Clone Repository, in the URL tab, paste that URL in there, check your local paths where you want to save it, click clone. I've made a whole video about the many ways to do this if you've just jumped into this puzzle. Maybe look earlier in the playlist. Okay, so here's the puzzle folder where I've downloaded it into my Git repos folder. Everything's there. So in PyCharm, I'll go to File, Open. I'll expand where I saved it, and we want to select the whole puzzle folder so we can get this virtual environment pop up. I'm going to save the virtual environment in the VNV file. Everything else is looking good. Click OK. Let it do its thing in the bottom right hand corner. Okay, it's looking good. Yep. Let's get rid of the README file. Let's look at main.py. So at the very bottom of the file, I'm just going to comment out example B and example C. So this way only example A is going to run. I'll just take you through the examples one at a time. So example A, we're just introducing the concept of a while loop. Now we've not really came across this before. True, this is a Boolean value. So Boolean values are either true or false. Usually they're written something like this, equals true or false, whatever. We'll cover this a bit more in depth as we go along, but it's a 1 or a 0, it's true or false. So this while loop is running when it's true, which means it's always going to run. Okay? If this is set as true, it's always going to run. So inside this while loop, it's going to execute this again and again and again and again until we hit break. And the break is inside of an if statement. So essentially what this loop is going to do is it's going to ask the user for input to enter the word apple. If the user does not enter apple, this will not run. Okay, so the user input converted to lowercase has to be apple, or else we're not going to hit the break statement, and the loop's just going to continue to run. But this else statement is going to increase the counter. So every time the user doesn't enter the word apple, this counter will be incremented again and again and again, and it will be displayed there once the loop exits after the break statement. Okay, so let me just demonstrate that for you. So enter the word apple, banana. Enter the word apple, no. Enter the word apple, apple. Okay, and it's counted the amount of tries. Now, it started at 0. counting with computers starts at 0. So that was 0, 1, 2. 2 tries. So you might have to possibly set this as 1 if you want to count like a human. Humans don't start counting at 0. Okay. So that's the example. For the puzzle, we're just going to go through knock-knock jokes. Why not? So I want you to write a knock-knock joke using while loops. And every time someone says knock-knock, you can try saying anything but who's there, and then have the program continually prompt the user for the correct input. So it should say knock-knock, who's there, Phil who, Phil these nuts. That's probably one of the better knock-knock jokes, to be honest with you. Okay, so the user has to be continually prompted to say who's there or who is there. Okay, so that looks like a more complicated if statement. And Phil who, so it's going to look something like this, guys, isn't it? But it's going to be a little bit more complicated here. Anyway, go have some fun with that. Down the bottom, I'll uncomment example B, comment out example A, so example B just runs. Okay, so I'm going to get some maths involved now. Sorry, example B. So very rarely do we call it counter. It takes too long to write counter. Programmers are lazy. We're naturally lazy people. It's a good thing, because if you're lazy, you're trying to sort of cheat the system and find the most efficient way to do something. So in this profession, laziness is okay. So instead of typing counter, we can just use a letter. The most common letter to use is I for a counter. It's just a language dependent thing. You could use X or A or whatever. I just seems to be a convention. We can also have another variable as total. Now we want to have both of these outside of the while loop because of scoping. So any variable created within here can only be accessed within here, inside the while loop. So user input, we won't be able to access user input outside the while loop. If I type in we're going to get an error if I highlight it. Might be referenced before assignment. So think of this as a global scope. I know it's not, but in our little example it is. It's at the top level of our little example. It's global in our little example. Everything in this function, this is at the top of the function. So it can be accessed in here. If it's within an indented bracket, an indented block, sorry, it can only be accessed within that block. So this is why we're creating these up here. So get rid of that. So we're doing this while loop. While I is less than 4, we're going to get the user's input, convert it into an integer. We're starting at 1, not 0, to make it human readable. We're increasing the total. Okay, so the total is kind of remembering whatever the user's input is every time it's entered, and every time the user enters another input, we just add it on. So essentially, we're just adding user input to user input here. This is a very common sort of syntax, and we're increasing the counter. Now in Python, you can do this. Variable equals variable plus 1, or you can just do plus equals. It's shorthand. You can also do plus minus if you want to -1. Oh, sorry, minus equals. So if we wanted to take one off, it would be minus equals 1. Okay, if I could do I correctly. But we want to increment, not decrement. And then we're going to print the total. So this is just basically adding. It's going to run this while loop. So it's going to start off in 1. So we go 2, 3, 4. So it's going to run it 3 times because 3 is less than 4. It'll stop because this statement will be false. Whenever it's true, it's going to run. Whenever it's false, it's not going to run. Whenever it's true, it runs. So that will run continuously until you do break. This one's going to be true to start with because 1 is less than 4. If we set that to 5, this wouldn't run because 5 is not less than 4. That's false. So it's just going to increment the counter. So you can kind of see how we're playing about with expressions here inside the while loop. We're doing counters and we're doing totals. And we're again continually prompting the user. So that's actually quite a lot happening there. Play about with it. I'll demonstrate it actually. So enter a number 2, enter a number 5, enter a number 3, total was 10. Okay? And see it continually prompted me. So 1, loop 1, loop 2, loop 3, and then it finished because 3 is less than 4. Remember, we set this as 1, not 0. So there's a kind of lot to take in there, a lot of little fiddly bits for you to play about with. So puzzle B, we're just going to throw some maths in there. So we want to ask the user to enter a number between 1 and 10. So you've already kind of got to be thinking how to stop them entering something like -1 and 11. Okay. And then we want to take whatever their input is and display the number to the power of 2, to the power of 3, 4 and 5. So if we enter number 2, 2 to the power of 2 is 4, 2 to the power of 3 is 8, and so on. So continually prompt the user to enter a number between 1 and 10. It's going to look very similar to this. Use an if statement to do this is probably the easiest thing to do. And then just shove the if statement in here. You know, the logic for the if statement. So just think about how you would use an if statement to do this, and then just make it a while loop. That's my little that's my little hint, okay? Because we've done this logic before with if statements, so you can do this really easy. And to do the power, I'll stop you having, because there's various different ways of doing it. Just use the pow function to do it, okay? So read up in pow. All right, example C. Let's take a look at that. Again, we're going over Boolean values, and they are on and off flags for loops. You use it forever. You use it your entire career. So here I have a Boolean. I'm calling the Boolean as active. We have this kind of, what would you call it? Culture where a lot of people like using is in front of doing words. So is active tells you exactly what it is. It is active, it's true. If we were doing a program that was about selling stuff in an online store and maybe the stock level goes down to 0 for something, we would have is out of stock. Not out of stock, true or false, but is out of stock. It's just a convention again. So counter equals 0, again doing the counter. So we can just use is active here as the Boolean value instead of doing true. We could disable this whole loop by setting it to false. Okay? Now what you might find is, I know this seems a bit pedantic, like why am I doing this when I can just write in true like in the first example, or do a sort of if statement sort of thing? Well, the reason is, although this is a Boolean value immediately above the while, this is very beginner levelish. As you become more advanced, you'll be passing Booleans into the function. And sometimes you might have several while loops in the function and you might want to turn one of them on and one of them off. So you would pass in true and false, and this would be true and the next one would be false. So I'm really just ripping out that complexity for you here. And I'm just saying, hey, this is a flag, it's true. You can turn on your while loop, and we can always turn it off inside the while loop, okay, to disable it. This is just an on and off flag. So while it is active, which is true, if the counter's less than or equal to 5, print this is loop, and then the number, and then increment the counter using a shorthand. And then as soon as it exceeds 5, so 6, print ending loop, disable the while loop by turning this to false, and reset the counter. This is very common as well. So you'll be using counters or something like it to count. So it might not be how many times the while loop's running, it might be other things, other variables outside of the loop that you want to set. You always have to reset them. It's a very common beginner error to increment or decrement something and then not reset it once your logic's done. So very common. So while the while loop condition is evaluated at the beginning of each loop, so if there was code after is active false, in this case the counter, it will still run. This does not immediately stop the while loop like a break statement does, okay? So the break statement up here would end this while loop and nothing else would run. This line here is outside, well, this line's outside of it, so that would run, but if there was anything here, it would not run, okay? Because it's exited. So in this case, this counter would be reset. And I'm just printing that there to show you that it's going to run because there's no break statement. If I was to type break here, you wouldn't see this. Okay, let's demonstrate it. And there you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ending loop. This still runs as there's no break statement. So it's fairly straightforward how to do while loops. It's just a really, really common thing to do to continually prompt the user for input if they enter the wrong thing, and then you can use logic within it. So puzzle C, we're going to make a maniacal program. So we're going to write a program that maniacally laughs at the user, as long as the user keeps laughing. So the program is going to go ha 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 ha, and then we're going to type in ha 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 ha. And then the program's going to type ha 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 ha, and then on we go forever. So I'm giving you a hint here, look up the in keyword to check if the string the user has entered contains the word ha. Because we don't know how many times the user's going to laugh, going to type in ha. They might type it in once or 7 times. Either way, we want to match it. So maybe research the in keyword. After laughing 3 times, the program should display a ha ha question mark. So that's going to be an if condition inside the while loop, right? And if the user enters a string containing ha, then keep on laughing. Use a keep laughing Boolean value to continually rerun a while loop. That's obviously C#. It should be, that's camel case, that should be snake case, because we are Python. I was trying to trick both you and me there. So use a keep underscore laughing Boolean value to continually rerun the while loop. So it's not going to be called as active, it's going to be called keep laughing. Okay, go have a shot at it. While loops are very useful to learn. The solutions are available in the solutions branch of the GitHub repo. Just click on solutions and have a look in main.py and all the answers are there. I'll just take you through them now though. Well, hopefully you had an attempt at solving those puzzles yourself. I'm just going to show you some quick solutions here. I'm going to comment out all the examples because we don't need them anymore. And puzzle A, let's just do puzzle A by itself just now, so I'll uncomment that. So we can see from the example, it's just a basic while loop with a counter looping over the user's input. So for puzzle A, we have a knock knock joke, knock knock, who's there, Phil who, Phil these nuts. It's still funny. So if we type in something wrong here, it's not to accept it, it's to continually prompt them, and same here. And if they enter the wrong reply 2 times, we have to tell them what to type in. So we have to tell them to type in these 2 things on the second failed attempt. Okay, so this is going to look very similar to the above example, so let's just get a counter set up. Get the while loop active, so while loop true, meaning it will always run. We'll get the user input as normal. And what did we say? Knock knock. Let's just copy and paste, that's our friend. Okay, so what else do we do in example? If user input dot lower, make it lowercase so we can compare apples to apples and not apples to oranges. So it would be who's there, right? It should be double equals sign because we're not setting it to that value, we're comparing it. Or if user input dot lower, also if it's also who is there, we'll have to accept that. In which case, break, you know, let's say end the while loop. Otherwise, we want to increment the counter. You could also do this as counter equals counter plus 1, whatever floats your boat, guys. I'm just going to use the shorthand version, it's very common. But for this second part, if the user enters the wrong reply 2 times, we have to have an if statement inside the else. So it'll be if counter is greater than 1, print, I don't know, just type who is there. And I'm doing little quotation marks around it. You could have also escaped the double quotation marks if you wanted. I'm just doing it like that. Also, the reason that's greater, counter is greater than 1, is the counter's starting from 0. So 0, 1 is 2 attempts. Okay, so on the third attempt, which would be 2, counting from 0 is going to get you a few times if you're new to this. But that's how computers work, my friends. And then it's just going to loop round until we get the right input, and then it's going to break. Let's test that out. So knock knock, if I type in apple, it just banana, just keeps running, and then it tells me to type in who is there. If I type in who's there, yeah, okay, it finishes because we've not written anything else. But that's working now, basically. That's working. So if the second half of the joke, fill who, it's the same thing, right? So you could just copy and paste that and then edit it. So what I'll do is I'll just get rid of all the sort of written stuff here. Blah, blah, blah. Do we want it to be called counter? It is going to be fine because this is going to basically reset this counter that was initialized here. This will just reset it in Python. We maybe should just give it a separate name. That way we've got separate counters for separate while loops. You don't have to do this, but I think it's a bit cleaner. Because in a sort of larger program, if you were reusing the same counter, you might come back in a year's time and make a logic change here or a logic change just before it, and then you're throwing everything off. It's just easier to have them in little blocks with their own little counters. Okay, so user input, fill. We want them to say fill's who, so we have to tell them fill. And then it's just going to be fill who is what we want them to type, right? And there's no other OR statement here. So if they type that in, correct, end the while loop. Otherwise, increment the who counter and tell them to just type fill who. That'll do. And then I think at the very end, we just have a print statement with the final punchline. I think that'll work. Let's give that a go. Knock, knock, teddy bear, nothing. Knock, knock, apple again, nothing. Who is there? Who is there? And if I don't type in the question mark, what happens? It continually repeats because it has to make that exact match. Fill who, fill these nuts. So that would have worked again. I can sort of retest it if you want. Oh, I didn't like that. What did I do wrong? Ah, okay. So the first thing is I missed the question mark there. This is why we do testing. This is good. So that was a good thing to catch. Knock, knock. Who's there? Fill, apple, fill, banana. Just type fill who. Fill who, fill these nuts. There we go. So that's a working solution. Let's go down and stop using puzzle A. We want to look at puzzle B now, so we'll uncomment it. And let's take a look. Okay, the example B is we're just basically using I as the counter. We've got a running total. And we're just going to continually add to this, the user input to this total, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what does the puzzle want? Write a program that asks the user for a number between 1 and 10 and then display that number to the power of 2, 3, 4, 5, blah, 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 blah. Okay, continually prompt the user to enter a number, while loop again. Think of how this would be done in an if statement. I just do it. So we just want to add some logic into the while there, instead of it just being while true, and use pow to do the power calculation. So we've covered pow in the maths puzzle we did, I think puzzle 3. Okay, as always, let's just get the user input. So it's just enter a number basically. That's what we want as the user input. But we need this to be converted to an integer. Okay, so that's the first prompt. So we get the user to enter a number, then we can just use a while loop. And then we want to do some if statement logic here. So we kind of want to do if user input's less than 0, or user input is greater than 10. I think that would be good logic there. So if that's true, I just want to use user input. Or we just have to sort of copy this again. I want to maybe just tell them, sorry, it has to be between 1 and 10. So this is going to loop over as long as that if statement's true. So we don't have to do a break or anything. As soon as that input's false, it's going to fail So as soon as you enter a number 1 to 10, I wonder if it'll take 0. It will take 0. Maybe that should be 1. Yeah, that should probably be 1. Anyway, so if you come in here and you enter, let's say 3, it'll loop around again and it will evaluate this expression again, and that'll be false and it won't run the loop anymore. So what's next? So now we've got the user input, we've continually prompted for the user input. We have to do the maths calculation. So really, you could just do this in a line. So you could have like answer 1, do the POW, so make it 2, and then user input, and then, you know, answer 2, and then what do we want? 3, and then you could do, you know, print. This is, if we do string interpolation again with an F there, something like that. But kind of, you can see why we'd want to maybe use a while loop for this, because it's the same code again and again. You know, if I made that, if I set this out a bit better, my point would be better. If I set it out like that, and we just made that 1, get rid of that, make that answer 2. You can kind of see it's the same thing again and again. So why shouldn't we use a while loop? If you did that, did I tell you to use a while loop? No, I didn't say. So technically you could get away with this, but you know, we're using while loops. Let's use a while loop. So what we need is a variable to check the power of. So this is kind of like the counter. We can use I as the counter. We can set it to 2, and then we'll do the calculation for the power of 2, and then we'll increase it to 3, and then we'll do the calculation for the power of 3. We'll increase it to 4, do the calculation for the power of 4 or 5, and then we'll stop it. So yeah, let's do that. Well, I is, so we want it to be less than or equal to 5, right? We want it to stop at 5. You could also just do less than 6. But I like that. I like that syntax. I don't know why, but I do like that. We could have answer 1 being the power. So instead of typing in 2, we'll type in our counter, which is I. And user input. So this is just the way the function takes the inputs. What to the power of what do you want, and what do you want to make the power of? That's just the way. If I hover over it, it should tell us. So it's just saying, yeah, use the base, then the exponent, and then the mod, blah blah blah. So you can just highlight stuff to see how it's supposed to work. Okay, and then we can have a generic print statement that's going to have everything in it that we need. So user input to the power of, and then we can throw the counter in there to the power of whatever the counter is, and then we can just do answer 1, whatever, and then we have to increment the counter. So plus equals 1, and this should just loop around and give us this sentence, do this calculation, you know, 4 times, and then give us 4 different print statements. I think that will work. If you did something like this, well done. Let's give it a go. Enter a number 5. I always like number 5. 5 to the power of 2 is 32, 3, blah 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 blah. let's run that again. We'll do 2, might know 2 a bit better. 2, 4, 3, 9, that's all I remember. 460, yeah, looks good to me. Looks good to me. Okay, let's take a look at C. Just got to remember, if you don't have like the right amount of spaces in here, PyCharm will throw a little error, so it's 2 spaces between functions. Let's comment out puzzle B and take a look at puzzle C. Okay, puzzle C. Example C, we're just using a Boolean flag and a counter, and the Boolean flag is kind of toggling the while loop on and off, and then we are sort of using the Boolean flag here to decide whether the while loop's going to run. But obviously it doesn't stop there, it continues. This only gets evaluated at the very start of each loop. So we set it false here, next time it will stop. Contagious laughter. Write a program that maniacally laughs at the user. So it's going to go ha 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 ha, and we're going to go ha 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 ha, and it's going to go ha 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 ha, and then it's just going to be a laughing loop. So after 3 times we should go ha ha ha, like a nice little question mark laugh. So we also have to check if a string contains ha. So I've given you basically the answer there, the in keyword. I don't want this to be too difficult on you guys. And we're going to just call it keep laughing. So let's get started. Let's get that Boolean value there. We'll just get a counter. We could call this I. I think in the future I will call it I. That's what I usually do, but as an absolute beginner level, I just want you to know that we're using this as a counter. So while, and I'm just going to copy and paste keep laughing because I always make mistakes when I'm typing. And if it doesn't match exactly, it'll be false and it won't run. So if the counter is less than 3, we want to print this statement. So ha 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 ha. And then we want to increment the counter. Else, so as soon as it goes 0, 1, 2, so the third attempt, the else will kick in, and we want it to kind of go print ha ha question mark. If I can do the quotes, it'd be better. And then we want to reset the counter. We don't ever want to leave the counter. For this size of program, obviously, you don't actually need to do this because it's only going to run once. It's never going to run again. But we always want to get into the habit of resetting the counter. It's a very common coding mistake to not reset the counter. And then something else calls this function. The counter doesn't start from 0, it starts from something else. Okay. Just get in the habit of resetting the counter. Now, also, we're just going to continue on in this while loop. We need to then get the user input. It can be whatever. I mean, maybe just ... whatever. Don't even need to put anything in there. And then after this, we're going to get user input, and based on the user's input, we have to toggle this keep laughing flag. Okay, so the first thing we need is we need a Boolean to just say, hey, does the user input contain ha? So we have this in keyword. If ha is in user input, we'll maybe make another Boolean. Boolean's all the way down. Maybe call it contains ha. We'll set that to true. Yeah, so we obviously can't just make up contains ha within here. It won't be accessible anywhere else. So we have to instantiate this just above it with the rest of the code, and we'll set that to false. So set it to false if the user input contains ha. Set it to true, so we're just toggling it. Then we have another if statement. Using contains ha. If it equals false, then we want to set keep laughing to false to end the while loop. So that'll end the while loop. We want to reset the counter and then maybe just give a sort of final print statement to show everyone the program's finished. I always think of that BT advert from the UK, It's Good to Talk, from like the 90s or the 2000s or something. It's good to talk, it's good to laugh. Now this is highlighted here. I like using the double equals sign. I come from a C# background. I use other languages. A lot of other languages use double equals. But in Python this can also be is. And I think that's what it was trying to tell me, because if I highlight the error, expression can be simplified, not contains ha. Oh, it could be not, well, I would say is. We could do that, whatever. I like the double equals though. I'm just going to leave it as double equals. I've got my style of coding, and that's tough for you if you don't like it. I think that might work. So this might be quite complicated to a beginner because I've just introduced booleans, a variable that can only be true or false. It can only be true or false, and then I'm just using if statements to toggle them, and then I'm toggling it again. So that probably is fairly complicated if you're a beginner. Let's step through it again. So keep laughing. Set it to true at the start. We want this while loop to run. We want this to be true. Set the counter to 0. So the while loop runs its first loop. It checks, is the counter less than 3? And it is, because it's 0. It prints that, and then it increments the counter. This won't run because this is an else statement. It matches the first part. It'll then ask for the user input. So we're just continuing down inside the while loop. Everything's indented, so it's all inside the while loop. Get the user input. And then we need to decide how is ha in the user input. So I've created a Boolean flag there. If ha is in user input, set contains ha to true. If contains ha is false, end the program. So we're just keeping track of whether the user input contains ha or not. Let's run that. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. So that should work because it's going to match ha, right? If I just type it in properly, it should also work. So just laughing, ha 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 ha. I hope you're laughing with me. Now we've hit that counter. So this has happened now. So the counter must be 3 now. 0, 1, 2, and on the third attempt it's saying ha. So we're going to continue laughing, I think so. So here we go again. And if I just go or something at the end, it finishes. So as soon as you don't enter a sentence that contains ha, it finishes. It's a good example. Probably simplify this. You could probably do this differently. I've got a feeling you could maybe put this all in 1 or 2 lines, but I just wanted to sort of step through for absolute beginners what we're doing here. So I think that's the 3 puzzles. Yeah, I had fun. Congratulations for completing another puzzle. My other channel, C# Puzzles, covers the same puzzle but in C#, and I have my premium puzzle website available. If you want to check out the premium version of this puzzle, I can take the puzzle a bit further. Now with while loops, when would you use while loops? Well, as we've sort of demonstrated, you are waiting for the user's input and you want to validate the user's input. That's a good reason. Waiting until a certain condition's met in your program. Maybe just parsing a lot of data, like if you've got like a CSV spreadsheet or a database and you're reading data, you might do a while loop. You know, while the database has data, while the spreadsheet has rows left, do this for every row, sort of thing. So while loops are common, and it's just a really easy way to loop through a piece of code until a condition's met. Okay guys, thank you very much. We'll see you in the next puzzle.